Hey everybody! I'm recording this on Friday, so in case you're wondering why I'm wearing a goofy hat and my hair's red, we had a hat day at school today, and it was also red and black day, so I sprayed my hair red. Hopefully this washes out tonight. Okay, so welcome to your lesson for Monday, October 12th. Today we are going to talk just a little bit about what we call the Greek Dark Ages. So I told you guys at the end of the day on Thursday when we talked about the Mycenaeans that all of a sudden around the 1100s BC, not all, but most of the major Bronze Age civilizations just kind of collapsed. So that doesn't mean they actually physically fell on top of themselves. What that means is for some reason, all of the advancement that had been happening and any new technologies they'd been developing, it all kind of stopped. Something dramatic happened, and we're not sure what. We actually call this the Bronze Age mystery. We're not really sure what happened. But when that happens, it launches Greece into something that we call a dark age. All right. So during this time, there's a couple of groups that pop up that kind of start dominating the Greek world. And even though it's a dark age, some interesting things do happen. So the first thing I want you to do is you should open up your notes that we've been working on. We started them last week. So it was the notes that had the map on it. And then there were notes about geography's impact, and then the Minoans, and then the Mycenaeans. And on the page of the Mycenaeans, there's another half of notes there. This is what you're going to be filling out. Okay? So here's the first group that pops up. We've got the Dorians. So the Dorians show up right after the decline of the Mycenaeans. And what makes them so powerful is that they show up with weapons made of iron. So we've now moved out of the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. And iron is significantly stronger than bronze. So they show up, the Mycenaeans still have armor and stuff that's made out of bronze. And here come the Dorians with weapons made out of iron. And that stuff just slashes through the bronze like butter. So they use their weapons, their advanced technology to conquer the Greek mainland. So that's the peninsula. And they rule in that area for about 300 years. Now, like I just said, we call this period a dark age, and we're going to talk in a minute here about what makes a dark age a dark age. This will not be the first time you see this terminology. But during this time, thousands of Greeks are going to leave that mainland, that peninsula, and they're going to go across the Aegean Sea over to Ionia. And you guys labeled that on your map on Monday and Tuesday. But if you look at the peninsula of what we call Greece, directly across, you labeled an area called Ionia. That's where these guys go and settle. So you not only see conquest and conquering, but also a massive exodus, so to speak, of people from the Greek mainland. Okay, so let's talk about why we call this a dark age. So typically speaking, when we refer to a period as a dark age, what we mean is that a lot of advancement in civilization sort of stops, and we sort of go into survival mode. So in this dark age, we're not building a lot of new cities. We're not making things like art and music and literature, because if you're in survival mode, you don't really have time to make beautiful things. Okay? They're not sitting around oh, I think I'm going to paint some pottery. Oh no, because they have to just make sure they've got food to eat and no one's attacking them and no one's burning down their house. And so there isn't really time to make art and music and literature. Okay? The other thing that happens is that we don't do a lot of writing. Okay? Because again, one, people probably don't have access to the materials they need to write things down. Two, people probably aren't being educated as much because, again, any children that might have been in some sort of school have probably gone back home to help just kind of run the family homestead. And three, again, no time to really sit around and write because we're just trying to not die, okay? In addition to that, and this is where the economic devastation happens, they stop trading. Not completely. Obviously, we still have to trade a little bit. But for the most part, all those major trade routes kind of shut down. and we get very insulated, and they're just kind of staying and working with whoever lives near them because they can't really afford to build big ships and go off and travel to other places. And because trade was central to the Greek economy, their economy sort of shuts down for a while. And because of this, poverty, and if you don't know what poverty means, that means like wide scale lack of resources and just a lower standard of living increases. So a lot of people are very poor, very devastated during this time. So it's not the best time in Greek history. Towards the end of this time period, however, and that's why we've got a little sunrise here, we start to see the Greeks kind of pull themselves out of this dark age when the Ionians show up. So the Ionians were over in Ionia. They were probably Greek expatriates, so to speak, who had fled during the Dorians. And now they're going to come back to the Greek mainland, and they're going to bring the Greek culture back, and they're going to bring back crafts. And the coolest thing they bring back with them is the Phoenician alphabet. The Phoenicians are one of our first civilizations that actually develop a written language. So instead of writing with pictures or symbols, they have actually made letters that represent sounds so they can then write full words. Okay? And so they're going to bring that Phoenician alphabet back to the Greeks, and the Greeks are going to take that alphabet and they're going to turn it into their own alphabet for their own system of writing. So during this time, we're going to start seeing the Greeks start writing things down more and being a little bit more creative and start to become that flourishing Greek civilization that everyone's so familiar with. By the 700s BC, the Greeks are passing down a lot of oral poetry, which is when you speak your poems and then someone memorizes it and then they tell that poem to someone else. And that's how that story gets passed down. And they're going to be passing these down through the Dark Ages. And a guy named Homer, who we talked about during the Mycenaeans, is going to take all that oral poetry, basically the history of the Greeks before the Dark Ages, and he's going to write it all down in his two most famous works, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Okay? And those are going to be two of our best records that we have of anything that happened before that Greek Dark Age, as far as something that's written down. But it's not really a primary source because they weren't alive, or he wasn't alive during those events. But that's where we get all the stories. All right? So, at the end of all of this, what we're seeing is the Greeks have pulled themselves out of the Dark Ages and things are starting to get better and they're starting to create again. And this is going to start pushing Greece into an amazing period of time where they're going to be creative and dominating and coming up with ideas and new things that are going to shape the entire Western world. We actually still experience a lot of this today, and that's what you're going to look at for your lesson today. So after you're done here, you're going to head over to Canvas and you're going to pull up the activity that we're going to do with the Greek alphabet and the Greek language, and you're going to find the Greeks have a lot to do with our language today. So have fun with that, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow.